introduce him. Walden Bello, he's running a little bit late, but I know everybody's busy, so I don't want to hold up the process. My name is Phil Robertson. I'm the Deputy Director of the Asia Division of Human Rights Watch, and I want to thank you for coming to this press conference. We are here on the eve of the ASEAN Leaders Summit in Vientiane, Laos. And unfortunately, one of the things that we think is probably not on the agenda is the whole issue of human rights, and certainly the case of our missing friend, Sombath Somphone. So we're going to have several speakers to talk about not only Sombath's case in the enforced disappearance that he suffered and our desire to find out what's happened to him, but also about other larger human rights issues in Laos. And all of you, as you came in, should have received a packet of information. Not only is there a press release there, but there's also information that is the result of a collaborative effort coordinated by the Sombath Initiative, but involving a number of different human rights and development groups, where there's various different information that I would call your attention to, sort of briefing papers that really focus on the issues related to the situation in Laos now. So, you know, Mekong Watch has done a paper on foreign aid in Laos. The International Federation of Human Rights has done a briefing on freedom of expression in Laos. Civil Rights Defenders is looking at the various different obligations and commitments that Laos has undertaken and not fulfilled. International Federation for Human Rights has also actually taken a look at all the various different international indexes on rights and democracy and shown where Laos comes out. There's also information from Focus on the Global South, who have been talking about foreign investment in Laos and the impacts on people there. And of course, the International Commission of Jurists looking at enforced disappearances. Importantly also, there's background information about our missing friend, Sombath Somphone, who, as I mentioned, was enforcibly disappeared by the Lao government in December 2012. So we're going to start first with Laurent Mélan from the Office of High Commissioner of Human Rights. He is the acting regional director of the Southeast Asia office there. He's been with the Office of High Commissioner for Human Rights for over 18 years and is a tremendous friend and ally of the families around the region who have lost loved ones, who are facing enforced disappearances and are trying to fight for their rights using the various UN mechanisms and processes. So let me turn it over to Laurent.
Thank you, Phil. Good morning, everyone. Today I thought that I will start this discussion by giving you first, a couple of ideas about what we see as some of the structural problems in Lao PDR in relation to the implementation of human rights. Then I would like to touch upon a number of particular human rights concerns we have at the moment, and finally I would like to raise a few issues that we believe are key issues to be raised in the context of the ASEAN meeting that is coming up. We have seen very little progress on the human rights front in Lao PDR in recent years, although the government has made several commitments to promote human rights, including in Geneva last year in 2015 during the Universal Periodic Review. Many of the obstacles that we have identified in Lao PDR to promote human rights and protect human rights are very much what I would say structural or institutional, and then I would like to go through some of them at the national level, regional level, and international level. So at the national level, the political and the legal system of Lao PDR does not provide a conducive environment for protecting human rights. Lao PDR, as you know, is a state ruled by a single party. Fundamental rights in the constitution are very limited. The criminal justice system is inquisitorial in practice, and trials contravene international human rights standards, including the right to fair trial. Defendants are usually detained for a prolonged period before trial without access to family members and lawyers. The country does not have an independent human rights institution as well as mechanism for redress and accountability for human rights violations. Civil society is tiny and heavily controlled. At the regional level, Laos PDR is a member of ASEAN, and as you know, is currently the chair of ASEAN. It is also a member of the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights. Overall, our assessment is that Laos PDR, along with a number of countries, has neglected to properly scrutinize human rights abuses within these regional bodies. Because the rule of consensus prevails, this has largely contributed to weaken the human rights agenda in the region. In addition to that, as Laos PDR is currently chair of ASEAN, I think this approach is even more problematic. At the international level, although Laos PDR has ratified 7 core human rights conventions, it has failed to keep up with its reporting obligation. It has submitted report only to 2 treaty bodies, so only 2 conventions on human rights. So I say that they ratified 7 core human rights conventions, but they reported to these bodies only on 2 conventions. We also regret that Laos has not engaged in other important human rights mechanisms. For example, only 2 UN human rights experts have visited the country over the past 18 years. Since then, we had a lot of UN experts who have been requesting visits, but they haven't been given permission to enter. Those mandates are summary execution, adequate housing, cultural rights, extreme poverty, and freedom of assembly, to give you a few examples. Since 2012, my office here in Bangkok, the OECHR Regional Office for Southeast Asia, we have been trying to engage the government in a bid to strengthen its capacity to promote and protect human rights. Overall, what we have seen and what we have observed is very little progress, and again, in spite of repeated commitment by the government to do more on human rights. In recent years, we have observed with concern a pattern of increased harassment of civil society activists, which is having a chilling effect on freedom of expression. As a result, we note that many individuals have chosen to self-censor over fears they will be punished. This is a very concerning development from our point of view, because especially in a country like Laos PDR, where democratic space is already very limited. Even more concerning has been the issue of disappearance of civil society activists. The case of Sombath is a striking example, but it is not an isolated case, unfortunately. 8 similar cases have been brought to the attention of the UN Working Group on enforced or involuntary disappearances. In particular, on the case of Sombath, I would like to say something that, in fact, I already said last year at the FCCT when we were discussing Sombath case. That we are of the view that the absence of progress in this case and in the investigation, coupled with the lack of cooperation with the family of the victim, questions the level of political will to establish the truth in this case. Another worrying development has been the arrest and secret detention of government critics. In March 2016, 3 human rights defenders were arrested at their homes for posting Facebook comments critical of government's human rights policies. They were held incommunicado until appearing on public television at the end of May, apologizing for their crimes. Their whereabouts, at the time I speak, remain unknown. Our office has been following these cases very closely, and we have expressed concerns privately and publicly on several occasions, but we have not received a progress report from the authorities at least for 3 years now. We are also concerned in relation to a number of legislation, and I would like to go through 3 of them. First, the new draft decree on association that could further hinder the ability of civil society activists to do their jobs. The bill limits local civil society organization to mere service delivery and prohibit association from receiving foreign funding without government approval. The bill also allows for organizations to be dissolved and their members investigated if they violate its provisions. The process for registering civil society organization remains slow and tedious. These restrictions have also been extended to international organizations. In 2013, the government adopted the guideline on international NGOs, which put similar restriction on the work of those NGOs. They are limited to working on development assistance and humanitarian aid in line with the government national and economic development plan. The UN has raised concern that this definition may prevent organizations working on other issues such as human rights and assisting marginalized groups. Another law that is a concern for us is the decree on communication activities of foreign media agencies, diplomatic mission, and international organizations. The decree, which came into force on 14 January 2016, outlines requirements for attaining approval prior to publishing any work. The decree specifically states that foreign media must submit their work to MOFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, before publication. It also set out the staffing approval and registration process for foreign media, international organization, and diplomatic mission. So obviously these three legislation are very concerning from our point of view. But human rights violations in Laos PDR go beyond restriction on freedom of expression, assembly, and fair trial to also encompass economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as indigenous people and minority rights. For example, the fate and whereabouts of Lao Hmong, deported from Thailand to Laos PDR, has been an issue of concern for years. Also, large development projects and land concession are severely impacting on the enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights by local communities. So now, looking ahead to next month's ASEAN Summit, I would like to highlight 4 issues of concern, which I think should be put forward by the international community and taken into consideration by the government of Laos PDR. The first concerns the case of Sombath. It is important that the Lao government takes the concern of the international community seriously and that it meets its pledges and obligations. Lao PDR human rights records were reviewed, as told you, by the Human Rights Council last year in 2015. During the review, the government committed to conduct an investigation in the case and to bring the perpetrator to justice. It was a commitment they made in Geneva with the international community. So far, no progress has been registered in the investigation. So our office continues to raise concern about this lack of progress. And also we believe that not all efforts have been made to carefully review the evidence. So it is crucial that the international community, including our office, continues to demand that the government meets its international human rights obligation in relation to this case. In addition to that, I would add that it is also important that other cases of disappearances should also be effectively investigated by the government, and this also includes some cases of Lao Hmong. Secondly, we are concerned about the cases of 3 activists arrested in March, as I mentioned previously, for criticizing the government on Facebook. The UN has communicated its concern to the government, and we urge the government to inform their family members and legal representatives of their whereabouts. Thirdly, my office remains very concerned by the decrees I just discussed with you, affecting association and the media, diplomatic mission, an international organization, and we urge the government of Laopedia to review those decrees in line with international standards, and we have offered our assistance in this regard to the government of Laopedia. Finally, we have been concerned about the impact of large development projects and land concession on land and natural resources in Laopedia and how it affects people's lives. In this regard, we believe that it is essential for the government to conduct meaningful and effective consultation with the affected communities, including indigenous people, and protect their land rights, livelihoods, and cultural heritage. At the same time, to ensure the realization of its economic, social, and cultural obligations, the government needs to adopt more robust mechanism for public participation and accountability, mechanisms that at this stage do not exist in Laopedia. I will stop here and we'll take questions later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laurent. Now we've been joined here on the panel by Walden Bello, who I'm going to ask to speak next. Walden is an activist, a politician, an academic, and a vote of principles and conscience in Southeast Asia on human rights and development. Today he's appearing with us as the Vice Chair of ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights. He co-founded the think tank Focus on the Global South, which is based here in Bangkok, in 1995. Until recently, he was a representative of the Congress in the Republic of the Philippines, and he recently ran for Senate in the last election. He is the 2003 recipient of the prestigious Right Livelihood Award, which is known as the Alternative Nobel Peace Prize, to many who have followed that award over the years. And actually, when the committee gave him the award, they described him as, quote, one of the leading critics of the current model of economic globalization, combining the roles of intellectual and activist. So we're very lucky to have Walden, who's come here from Manila, and I'd like to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. And I just wanted to first relate something from a few years ago, also with respect to the Sombath campaign when we first had the event here. A good friend of mine had said that FCCT was on the Planchit stop of the BTS. And for some reason, that's always stuck with me since then. And I always stop at Planchit, and I've always been late because of that. So this is what happens when you have a senior moment that sticks there forever. Okay, I'm very happy to join you here today. I really don't expect to say much except to say that I headed up the first parliamentary mission to go to Laos back in 2013. The three of us, including the APHR chair, Charles Santiago, met with the Lao government, and the response that they had to very, very serious questions we've had since then was that they did not, in fact, know what happened, but that the police was continuing to investigate. And ever since then, the response has been the same, despite the fact that the CCTV tapes, which were very strong evidence of abduction, have been constantly shown. The story has continued to remain the same. The police continues to investigate, and we really don't know what happened. So Focus on the Global South, the organization that I represent here today, has stuck with this issue because we feel that it is an extremely important issue that has a bearing on the future of democracy and human rights in Laos. We cannot let this go, because if we let this go, it would be giving up. It would be giving up to the forces that would like to continue the regime of repression that exists in that land today. We continue to be hopeful that Sombath will eventually appear. We think, though, that that is an eventuality that can only happen if we have support throughout ASEAN and the international community to continue to pressure the Lao government to surface Sombath. An answer to us that says we don't know what happened. We continue to investigate. And by the way, you're intervening in Laos's internal affairs. And by the way, human rights is a Western concern. And by the way, you better shut up, because you're violating the ASEAN Code of non-intervention in each other's affairs. If that's the kind of answers that we've been getting, and we just want to tell the Lao government that that does not work. The world is looking at you. Please surface Sombath now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Walden. Now we're going to turn to Shui Meng, who is the wife of Sombath Somphone and a longtime resident of Laos. She and Sombath met in 1978 when they were both students at the University of Hawaii, and she was working towards a PhD in sociology while he was working on his BA in education and MA in agriculture. She's originally from Singapore. She became a senior research fellow at the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies in Singapore before joining UNICEF. And she worked in senior positions with UNICEF in Laos, China, and Timor-Leste before retiring in 2008. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, and good morning to everybody. Thank you also to the speakers, the previous speakers, Lauren and Walden. And Walden, next time I hope you will remember it's not Phonchit, BTS, but Chitlong. So you don't need to have to walk so far. Dear friends, I've spoken several times here before, and I thank every one of you for coming again. As you know, 30 August each year marks the International Day of the Disappeared. And each year, when this day comes around, human rights groups, international community, the UN organizations will all remind us of the issues of enforced disappearance taking place all around the world, and urge for governments to stop such violations. Today's event here is also to remind everybody that Sombath Somphone is still disappeared. For your show of support and solidarity, I sincerely thank you, and I'm grateful that you all, after more than 3.5 years, have continued to be interested in the case and to be with me to continue in my campaign and search for truth and justice for Sombath. On the case of Sombath's disappearance, I'm sorry to say I have no new information to share. And as Walden has said earlier in his remarks, the government continues to maintain that the state is not involved and the police are still investigating. But for all this time of investigation, I have never seen any report. Nor have I been contacted by the police for any update for more than 2 years, coming on to 3 years now. The lack of any new information has been psychologically and emotionally draining. Not only is it extremely difficult to bear, it is also increasingly challenging for me to sustain support from the diplomatic community, the UN, the media, or even from Sombath's friends and family inside or outside Laos. And I believe that is exactly what Sombath's abductors want. Let the passing of time erase the memory of Sombath's disappearance. But should we allow the memory of Sombath's disappearance to be erased? Should we allow such impunity to continue? And should we allow the perpetrators of such injustice to win? I hope not. And as Lauren has reminded everybody, Sombath's disappearance is not the only case of enforced disappearance in Laos. The UN reported 8 cases officially submitted to the UN Working Group for enforced and involuntary disappearances. But there are many other cases which never get to be reported. Because inside Laos, not very many people, especially ordinary Lao people, they don't know about the UN mandate. They don't know about the treaty bodies. They don't know that there are recourse they can take. And as Lauren has reminded us, just last year, 3 young Lao who returned to Vientiane, to their home provinces to renew their passports have been disappeared. And it was only through the social media that later they were surfaced publicly on TV, all dressed in prison garb, and all confessed to their crimes, to use Facebook to defame the government. Inside Laos, actually many people do not even know of these 3 cases because the highly controlled media has never reported on them. And for those Lao who know about these cases and other cases of human rights violations, many prefer not to talk about them for fear of inviting the unwelcome attention of the security forces, or worse, put themselves at the risk of police harassment and reprisals. So, given Laos' prevailing repressive atmosphere and the general public fear to talk about human rights abuses, is there any hope for change? That is the